Now, when I predicted, the Volunteers hugely proved me wrong, and I'm really happy that they did. I feared that this game was going to be the Crimson Tide, as they usually do, including in the Saban era. They would just demolish the Volunteers and win easily and become a joke in the first half. Predicted that the Crimson Tide would easily score more than 23 points in the first half, make it a joke. It would just become worse in the second half, and they'd also easily score more than 23 points in the second half, and if I recall, winning by 28 points or more, covering that spread. And I predicted that the Crimson Tide would win easily, 56-17. That's what the score I predicted for Vols Nation or Vol Nation, and I was hugely proved wrong by the Volunteers because they gave me exactly what I wanted. They gave me a good, entertaining, competitive, watchable game, and I was really impressed by the Volunteers because they end up after an early turnover. The Volunteers defense didn't quit. They effectively defended. They were able to intercept a pass in the end zone, and they had a return of more than 45 yards, so that was a great return. Volunteers offense was able to capitalize off that turnover, move the football, end up scoring a touchdown, getting the game tied 7-7. And Volunteers were able to keep this a close, close game for the entire first half. And Crimson Tide, they weren't winning by much at halftime. And also, third quarter, the Volunteers continued to keep it close. In fourth quarter, until, of course, the fumble was returned by the Crimson Tide defense to increase the lead to 35-13. It was still a close game for more than 50 game minutes, and I was really happy that the Volunteers, they kept the game good, competitive, and watchable. And not just that, also the fact that they really had my optimism high that they were going to be able to get this game tied and possibly win it, except they didn't, because they made critical mistakes, with two critical mistakes being the fact that there was a Volunteers defender. He ended up, after the play was over, he ended up making contact, pushing down on Jones, which was unnecessary. So, not surprised the flag was called. There was a flag thrown. Volunteers defense gets a flag and gives the Crimson Tide a new set of downs. They move the football, and they're able to increase the lead to 28-13. That doesn't happen, then Volunteers get the football, Crimson Tide punt, Volunteers get the football, and highly possibly that just changes the entire momentum with the Volunteers able to move the football, score a touchdown, and momentum continues for Volunteers, and possibly they win this game if they don't have that huge critical mistake, along with the other huge critical mistake of Volunteers they fumble in the end zone. And then that fumble is returned more than 102 yards by the Crimson Tide defense for an impressive touchdown to increase that lead to 35-13, making any chance of the Volunteers actually tying this game hugely unlikely, because it increases the lead to 22 points, and it's really hard to come back against the Crimson Tide. 22 points with the game is almost half over, including the fact that it's in Alabama. That's a huge high wall to climb. Not surprised the Volunteers weren't able to climb that. Playing an excellent Alabama team, as they usually are in the Saban era, and how they've also been before the Saban era, but mainly in the Saban era. And now, obviously, that wasn't. I was on the Vol Nation message boards of the whole game, and it wasn't a bad call. It wasn't a terrible call at all. The call didn't happen because it was in Alabama. It could have been in Rocky Top, and the call still would have happened on the Volunteers defense, because defense cannot make that kind of contact after whether it's offense or it's defense. That kind of contact can't be made after the play is over, and the play was over, and the Vols defender, D lineman, ended up deciding to make extra contact, and that's why the flag was thrown. It could have been happening whether the location was in Florida, Rocky Top, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Ohio State, etc. It's going to get called, because that's the kind of contact that can't be made after the play is over. It didn't happen because it was in Alabama. It happened because it's illegal contact that can't be made after the play is over. And So obviously those are the two huge critical mistakes by the Volunteers. Except again, I'm just really happy because the Volunteers, they showed progress after that misery against Georgia because they kept this for more than 50 game minutes, a close, entertaining, watchable game. They ran the furthest distance with Alabama, as in this is how long, as in it took Alabama more than 49 game minutes before they made it a laugh or a joke, winning by 22 points. And Volunteers were threatening to score with late in the fourth quarter with less. It was in the 750 or close to almost halfway. If I recall it, close to halfway over. It was like in the seven. The amount of minutes it said was 7, and then I can't recall the amount of seconds, but it's close to halfway over. It is halfway over or close to halfway. It is halfway over and past the halfway over point for amount of time, and the Volunteers, they're threatening to score to actually decrease this 15-point lead to, assuming they make the extra point, and it would be decreased to 8. So it didn't happen, except still, that's the amount of points that Crimson Tide were only leading for before that fumble return for a touchdown. They were leading by 15 going into the fourth quarter, which isn't a high amount. And this was in Alabama, the number one team, leading by 15 points against the Tennessee Volunteers, a team with a losing record in Alabama, only by 15 points before that fumble return for a touchdown. So that was an impressive feat by the Volunteers. Also, the fact that the Crimson Tide, they didn't cover the spread, if I recall it, is like 34 points. They didn't cover that. Volunteers ran the longest distance, meaning the Volunteers kept it a close, watchable game for the highest amount of time before the Crimson Tide made it a laugh or a joke compared to all other teams before Tennessee. And of all other teams that played Alabama before Tennessee, Tennessee's the only one that kept it a close, watchable game going into the fourth quarter and with more than 49 game minutes or with more than 45 game regulated minutes or higher. And so I'm really happy the Volunteers. I'm still disappointed because they kept it a close, watchable game. They got my hopes up. Optimism that they were going to be able to not just score a touchdown, but also maybe possibly win this game, and that completely got removed once the Crimson Tide were able to return that fumble for a touchdown to increase the lead to 22 points. So that's why I'm still happy. I'm happy that the Volunteers made it a close, watchable, entertaining, good game. Except I'm also hugely disappointed because they had those kind of critical mistakes that are reasons why they ended up losing this game, and they got my optimism that they were actually going to win this game and weren't able to win what was mostly a close game versus the Crimson Tide. They weren't able to score the critical needed points to get the game tied and also take the lead. So that was just extremely disappointing that they had those two huge mistakes, and also the fact, which included the fumble in the end zone. So I'm happy that the Volunteers gave me what I wanted, which was a good, watchable, competitive, entertaining game, except I'm also disappointed because they had those hugely critical mistakes. So it is what I wanted, but it isn't fully what I wanted. So that's what I wanted, except with an asterisk because of when I'm bringing up those flaws. So it's going to be really interesting. Volunteers play the Gamecocks today, so it's going to be really interesting if they're able to. Adversity reveals character, seeing if they're able to rebound after that frustrating loss and see if they're able to rebound by winning in Rocky Top versus the Gamecocks. Same Gamecocks team that was able to win a far distance with Florida. That was a close game. Weren't able to win that, but that was still a close game, and they were able to go into Georgia and had an impressive win, winning in double overtime versus a great Georgia Bulldogs team. So it's going to be really interesting to see if the Volunteers can rebound today versus the Gamecocks in Rocky Top.